When the war broke out in 1967, it was not only soldiers who bled, it was ordinary people caught in a storm of hatred. Before a single bullet was fired between Nigeria and Biafra, Igbo men, women, and children were hunted in the northern cities. Crowds dragged people from buses, markets, and homes. Some were hacked with machetes, others burned in the streets. Families were forced to watch, unable to scream, as fathers were humiliated and then killed. Those who survived carried the memory of neighbors turning into executioners. When Biafra declared independence, the war began in earnest. On the battlefield, soldiers who surrendered often did not live long enough to tell their stories. Captured men were beaten until they could no longer stand, paraded before villagers as traitors, and sometimes executed in public squares. A captured Biafran officer might be tied to a stake and shot before a crowd. His death meant to terrify anyone who thought of resisting. Nigerian prisoners inside Biafra also knew the taste of torture days without food, the whip across their backs, and accusations of betrayal before a firing squad. But the greatest suffering was not always from bullets or bayonets. It came from the hunger that stalked Biafra. The federal government sealed its borders, cut off food and medicine, and starved the secessionist region into submission. Children's bodies swelled with kwashiorkor. Mothers, powerless, watched their babies wither slowly, while planes roared overhead, dropping bombs on villages already dying from famine. For many survivors, the true torture was not the sudden pain of violence, but the slow, endless torment of hunger and helplessness. In both Nigeria and Biafra, fear silenced dissent. Inside Biafra, anyone suspected of sabotage or sympathy for Nigeria could be dragged to a military tribunal. Sometimes the evidence was nothing more than a rumor. Prisoners were beaten, denied sleep, humiliated, or executed without trial. Nigerian troops, too, sometimes treated entire villages as guilty by association, burning homes, interrogating civilians with rifle butts, and using torture to force confessions about rebel movements. Perhaps the cruelest torture was psychological. In the cities, public executions were staged as lessons. Crowds compelled to watch men tied to stakes, blindfolded, then cut down by rifle fire. Parents held their children's hands as if to shield their eyes, but no one was spared the sight. Trauma spread like a second war, haunting people long after the gunfire faded. By the war's end in 1970, between 1 and 3 million people were dead, most not from combat, but from starvation and disease. Nigeria's leaders declared no victor, no vanquished, yet survivors carried invisible wounds. They remembered the pogroms, the starvation, the fear of soldiers who used torture as a weapon. The war was not just a clash of armies, it was a war where bodies became bargaining chips, where hunger itself was turned into a weapon, and where the line between soldier and civilian blurred into tragedy. The scars remain, etched not only in history books, but in the memories of those who endured a conflict where torture was both physical and unseen, lingering in silence long after the last gun fell quiet.